This is a T5 transmission. I wish there was some way I could wave a magic wand and make it stronger.
Wow, I knew you could use a camshaft to make more power, but to make a transmission stronger? What magic is this? Greetings, fellow DIYer, and welcome to my video.
This is a T5 transmission. It has been the transmission of choice for hot rodders for almost 35 years. It has 5 gears, with the 5th being an overdrive, allowing you to run at a decent RPM at highway speeds. The problem is, they're not terribly strong. The stock units that came out of the mid-80s Mustangs were good for about 230 foot-pounds of torque. The early 90s Mustangs were good for between 300 and 330 foot-pounds. There's a few things you can do, like a billet counter gear stabilizer, Z-spec gears, solid steel input shaft bearing retainer. All those things combined, you can build one of these and max it out at about 400 foot-pounds. Great for most 302s, most 289s. If you're going to put something that has a lot of torque, like a 351 in front of this, you're running the risk of blowing it up. I give you the TKX, Tremec's answer to a 5-speed transmission that's small enough to easily fit in most hot rods, but strong enough to handle the torque and horsepower that today's hot rods seem to have. This unit is very comparable in size and shape to a T5, but it's good up to 600 foot-pounds of torque, which means you can put this behind a 351 or a big block and not worry about blowing it up. This unit is smaller in size than the TKO type transmission, which gives you a lot more options as far as installing one. There are a few notable differences between these two transmissions. The T5 uses a 10 spline input shaft, which is one of the weaker points on the transmission, whereas the TKX uses a 26 spline input shaft. The output shafts are also different splines, with the TKX having a larger count, again, for strength. Size-wise, the biggest difference is that the TKX is deeper. It's not taller, it's deeper. So the distance from the input shaft to the top and the input shaft to the top is basically the same. But the distance from the input shaft down is actually a little bit deeper on the TKX. This is to accommodate the bigger parts required to have the extra strength and rigidity that this unit has. The other thing that a person needs to notice, and this is extremely important if installing this unit on something like a classic Mustang, there is a lot less room in this area right here. As you can see, this comes straight out and then drops off for the shifter, where this comes straight out and the shifter is up just a little bit. And that can create a problem on a classic Mustang due to the pan reinforcement that runs right in front of the OEM shifter location. This is the underside of a 65 Ford Mustang, and this is the cross member that I spoke of that does create clearance issues when trying to fit a TKX into a classic Mustang. The other important thing to take note of is the weight difference. The T5 transmission, when I put it on the scale, came in right around 73 pounds. The TKX transmission weighs 20 pounds more. The TKX uses the exact same bell housing for Ford applications as the TKO. Here in front of you, I have a TKO bell housing here on the right and a T5 bell housing here on the left. At first glance, they look identical. And the reason for that is they come from the same casting. They are cast the same. The difference is the machining. The bolt pattern for the TKX and TKO is different than the bolt pattern for the T5. If you look on the T5 bell housing, we have no hole here. but there is a hole here on the TKX. No hole here is a hole here. The two holes on the right for the TKX bell housing are very close to where the holes need to be for the T5. You have heard of people taking a T5 bell housing, welding those two holes closed, and then drilling them and retapping them. If you're going to use a Ford style T5 or TKX bell housing, it's a little different than your old school OEM 4-speed bell housing. On a TKO, TKX, or T5, the clutch is actuated by moving the clutch fork from the back of the car towards the front of the car. This requires you to either use a cable clutch or, my preference, a hydraulic clutch. This is a hydraulic clutch bracket for a T5, mounts to the side of the T5 transmission and allows you to attach a slave cylinder. And this is the new TKX hydraulic clutch bracket. It bolts to the tabs of the transmission. So basically it's going to fit just like that and sandwich the transmission tabs between the bracket and the bell housing. Both of these hydraulic clutch brackets use a push-style slave cylinder and are available on dayscars.com. Keep in mind that the TKX bracket and the TKO bracket, while very similar, are different. Because of the ribs on the transmissions, a TKO bracket will not work with a TKX. Just a few more things we need to take a look at. The first one is the flywheel. It is the same flywheel that you would use for a T5 or a TKO. It's 157 tooth, and because the bell housings are the same casting, it's the same flywheel. That also means that you can use the same starter. I recommend a starter like this. In 1993, Ford went to a gear reduction starter, and previous years, you have the big bulky starter that doesn't turn things very fast. But if you get a 93 Ford Mustang starter, it will be gear reduction, and it'll be a lot less expensive than the aftermarket gear reduction type starters. This is the slip yoke, and like I said before, it has a lot more splines than the T5, so it does require a special slip yoke. And all the slip yokes I found use the 1330 U-joint. So I ended up getting a 1330 to 1310 U-joint adapter to be able to put it directly onto the drive shaft I currently have. Eventually, I will go with the 1330 U-joint on both ends of the drive shaft because it'll be stronger, but for the time being, I'm just going to go with this unit to get the car up and running.
If you like what you've seen, please click like. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.
Wow, there must have been some magic in that old bump stick I found.